folks. Tito, Jeff Thitoff here with you. The Jeff Thitoff Show, aptly named, eh? Follow me on Twitter, @ThatHappens. Lots to talk about today. And college basketball is going to really dominate the conversation today. We now have our Final Four on the men's side set. Illinois, Arizona, Duke, Michigan. Illinois ended Iowa's run, 71-59. I'll talk more about Iowa with their Nebraska game in a little bit here. Arizona defeated Purdue, 79-64. This Arizona team looks damn good. And after the game against Purdue, I thought, wow, this might be the best team in the country. Then I watched Michigan destroy Tennessee 95-62. That Michigan team actually might be the best team in the country. Michigan and Arizona will face off in the Final Four. Illinois' opponent will be UConn. And UConn defeated Duke 73-72. I hope you saw it. If you didn't, go back and watch how it ended. But Duke had a 15-point lead at the half, led by as many as 19 points before blowing this game. Freshman, okay, let's go back. Duke had the ball up two. Duke had the ball, 10 seconds left. Inbounded, couple of passes, and then one gets stolen. Freshman Braylon Mullins hits a three with 0.4 seconds left in the game. So interesting that's the way it ended. And, Duke, and it was Caden Boozer threw the pass, got intercepted, got tipped. It was tipped. And then, like I said, Braylon Mullins hit the 3-pointer, 0.4 seconds left. One of the most clutch shots in NCAA tournament history, especially with what was on the line there. But UConn, before that, they were 4 for 22 on 3-pointers. But the fifth one, though, is the one that counts. Mullins hitting that one. Duke looked so good early on. When I've watched Duke play this season, their defense is what has set them apart in a lot of ways. I know they're young, but they play great defense. They generate steals. They generate easy buckets. And Duke had too many turnovers in this game, especially down the stretch. The way UConn, they let UConn back in the game. And on this right here, there's two ways you can look at this. You can say that John Shire was outcoached by Dan Hurley. You could also say it's because how young Duke is that they could not hold on to that 19-point lead in a clutch situation. It's a second straight season now that Duke had a tough loss. They were leading. You remember last year against Houston in the Final Four, Duke was up 6 with a minute 14 left in the game and lost. I don't know if that's worse than this one or not. But Duke led by 6 with a minute 14 left against Houston. Final Four, lost it last year. Now, part of the situation is, you have to weigh into this, is the fact that Duke constantly gets these one and dones. And that's okay. Coach K used to not want to do that. He was very, I don't want to say he was Dabo Sweeney, but kind of like that. Like, I don't want one and dones. Well, then he realized, hey, I've got to adapt to this. I don't know if Dabo's fully adapted to it yet. Bad comparison because Coach K a lot more decorated than Dabo. Anyway, but so Duke now, because of the way they turn the roster over, and they're going to lose guys this year. Look, Cam Boozer going to be gone. Caden might come back. I don't know. We'll see what kind of draft stock he gets, but he might come back. I don't know about that one. But what I'm saying is, though, when you get the things that made Coach K's Duke teams so damn elite was they had 3- and 4-year guys. Leitner, 4 years. Hurley was there for a long time. Grant Hill. All these guys that would come through, they weren't one and dones. And that gave Coach K, I don't want to say an advantage, but gave him a better idea of how to coach the team. And these guys had been through it before. What Duke had lost to UNLV. And Duke found a way then to overcome that. But they went through that kind of a heartbreak. And this Duke team every year doesn't, for the most part, they've got kids who haven't experienced it. That's the big difference in college basketball today. I think coaching's more important than ever. Yes, talent important, no doubt. I'm not saying it's not. But when you've got to adjust your team, adjust your culture, adjust your style of play based on, half at least of the team is new from the previous year, that's not easy. So kudos to Dan Hurley for being able to do it. Kudos to anybody. I'm not saying, look, Shire's a good coach. He's a good coach. But games like this come down to coaching and experience in a lot of ways. I know a freshman made the shot, so I'm probably talking out both sides of my mouth. But nonetheless, it's when you get to situations like this, if you've got a veteran team, advantage veteran team, and coaching is a big deal. It's a huge deal here. Duke should have held on for the foul. Get fouled, go down and make a couple free throws, game's over. I can't believe Duke lost this game. Cannot believe it. I watched the entire game, shocked still that Duke blew this game. 73-72 over Duke. Again, Braylon Mullins now will never, I always say this, never have to buy another meal in Connecticut for the rest of his life. All right. Other news in college basketball on the men's side there. St. John's made their run to the Elite Eight. And Rick Pitino signed a new deal with St. John's. And Pitino, by the way, is 73 years old. The deal, it will take him, it goes through the 29-30 season, and it makes him the second highest paid coach in the Big East behind Dan Hurley, the aforementioned there. This just finished up his third year for Pitino, 81-25, 2 NCAA tournament appearances, 20 more games in all 3 of his seasons, 30 or more in each of the past 2. St. John's finished 30-7 this year. They did reach a top 5 ranking at one point. I'm amazed what Pitino's able to do. When you talk about, I just mentioned the thing with all the different players you have coming through. Think about the programs. Pitino at Providence, at Kentucky, at Louisville, at Iona, and now St. John's. One of the 3 coaches to take a team to the Sweet 16 in 5 different decades. Now, I will tell you, I don't like Pitino because when he went to the Celtics, I'm a Celtics fan. I really thought he'd do something good there. I was excited about Pitino to the Celtics, and they bombed out. And by the way, I bought his book. Pitino, around that time, he went to the Celtics, had a book out called Success is a Choice. He did not choose success, and I did burn that book. I did. I bought the book, and then I burned the book after he left Boston in shambles. Larry Bird's not walking through that door, whatever. He went on. I'm going on a tangent now, but he decided to go all in on Kentucky guys. Antoine Walker was fine, but some of the other ones, not so much. He just didn't do a good job there. Anyway, I digress. All right, I want to talk about on the men's side here about the Nebraska and Iowa game that led to Nebraska advancing in the NCAA tournament. Nebraska had a great season this year. They really did. Nebraska had never before won an NCAA tournament game until winning 2 this year before getting bounced by Iowa in the Sweet 16. Iowa won the game on Bennett Sturt's three-pointer. They took the lead. Okay, let's back up a little bit. Nebraska led this game almost the entire way. With about 2 minutes left, Bennett Sturt's hit a three-pointer for Iowa, and that gave Iowa their first lead of the game. Then Tate Sage hit another one for Iowa. Take them up by 6 points there. Price Sanford, who actually played for Iowa last season, hit a three-pointer for Nebraska, cuts the deficit to 3. There's now 58.8 seconds left in the game. Nebraska calls timeout. So Nebraska calls the timeout. They can set up their defense. Iowa's under their own basket. They're on the baseline. They're getting ready to take it out. And Nebraska can decide, they have this full timeout to decide what the hell they want to do in these last 58 seconds. I'm sure they're going to try to play defense first, try to get them to miss a shot, or try to drain the shot clock, them get the ball back, whatever. So now this is what's going on. So going further now. So they call the timeout, and then coming out of the timeout, Norman Dale, a.k.a. Hoiberg, Fred Hoiberg, this is what happens.
Coach, need one more. My team's on the floor. Okay. What are you trying to do?
Nebraska comes out with 4 players on the floor. Iowa gets an easy bucket. It was Alvaro Fulgaris for Iowa, who also hit the shot against Florida to win that game at the very end. He hit the 3-point shot there. He broke down the middle of the floor, wide open. They hit him. He scores and the foul. Iowa goes on to win. Nebraska's dream season ends. They were a 4 seed. They won their first 2 NCAA tournament games in history, like I mentioned that before. They finished 28-7. Ended up second in a very tough Big Ten. Look, the Big Ten was stacked this year. Second in the Big Ten is a big deal. They started off the season 20-0 before going 8-7 after that. The Big Ten will end up with, they got 2 teams right now in the Final Four, so good for them. Before we move on, to other news. LSU, we'll do this first. LSU has hired Will Wade as their basketball coach. They fire Matt McMahon. The reason this is significant, Will Wade was once the head coach at LSU of their basketball program from 2017 to 2022. Why did he leave? Not from lack of success. Look, he got them to their 3 NCAA tournaments, their first SEC regular season title in a decade back in 2019, went 105-51 at LSU. That's good. Why would you fire Will Wade? Because Will Wade was caught on an FBI wiretap saying he made a strong-ass offer to a recruit. That's why Will Wade got NCAA sanctions, LSU got sanctioned, and Will Wade ended up having to leave disgracefully, in my opinion, because of that. He broke the rules. That's what he did. Now, NIL, I know it's different now. Yes, it's different now. You can make these kind of offers. You can make strong-ass offers if you want to. But at the time, the rule said you couldn't do that. And Will Wade did it anyway, and that's why he lost his job. Will Wade goes to McNeese State, then goes to NC State, where he was this past season. Signed a multi-year deal with them. Just finished up his first year with NC State. They lost in the first 4 of the NCAA tournament. After that game, after the ACC tournament game. ACC tournament, they got beat by Virginia. But after the ACC tournament game, so we're talking, this is even before the NCAA tournament. After the ACC tournament loss to Virginia, Will Wade was asked by a reporter about possibly going to LSU. At the time, LSU had not fired their head coach. Matt McMahon was still there. Here was what Will Wade said. Is the job open there? No. Listen, let me be very clear. I'm excited at NC State. I was hired at NC State to do a job. This wasn't going to take 1 year. I've already met with our administration about next year and some of the changes that we need to make and some of the things that we need to do to put this program where it deserves long term. He said, this is not going to take 1 year. So then he goes out, talks to LSU, takes the LSU job. They fire Matt McMahon. North Carolina State's athletic director, Corrigan, said that he felt he and the fans were lied to. And he said, let the fans know, is what he said. I'm as surprised as they are by what's going on. The resignation letter for Will Wade did not come from Will Wade. It came from his agent in an email. The agent emailed Corrigan and said, we're resigning, that kind of thing. So LSU is now paying Matt McMahon, the guy they just got rid of, more than $8 million. He got a 7-year deal when he was hired to replace Will Wade. Why? Because LSU knew with these sanctions, it was going to hamstring the next coach, Matt McMahon. They give him a 7-year deal. They owe him more than $8 million now. McMahon has 3 years left on that deal. So they also have to pay $4 million to NC State, LSU does, for the buyout for Will Wade. It could have been $5 million by one day, $3 million by a different date. They negotiated it and said, okay, let's just make a clean break. We'll pay the $4 million. LSU paid $4 million to NC State to get him. In the past 4 months, LSU has put more than $60 million in dead money on the books. McMahon's staff, they'll get at least another $1 million in their buyout things. Also, LSU paid $3 million to hire football coach Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss. Think about that. $54 million going to Brian Kelly, who they fired to hire Lane Kiffin. Well, they didn't fire him to hire him. He fired before that, but nonetheless, that's who ends up replacing him. So, Lane Kiffin famously lied to Tennessee fans. Lane Kiffin told the Tennessee fans that he's there long term. Hell, he named his kid Knox, his newborn, Knox, because of Knoxville, Tennessee, obviously. I always thought he called him Rocky, but I guess it was Knox. Knox was the kid's name. And then left for USC in the middle of the night under a shroud of secrecy. So, LSU now has hired a coach who lied to fans, hired another coach who again lied, but also broke rules. And it just goes to show me LSU doesn't care about ethics. All they want to do is win. I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world. I just wonder if LSU fans, if there's any of them that have a problem with this. With Ohio State, I bleed scarlet and gray. I'm not naive enough to think that Woody Hayes could coach in today's college football. He couldn't. And I'm not naive enough to think that there weren't things that happened at Ohio State where I'm sure players, I'm not saying they got like huge money, but I also don't think Ohio State followed the rules to a T. And I think that was the same for a lot of those successful college football programs back in the 60s and 70s. Look at John Wooden with UCLA, same kind of thing. John Wooden's teams were not squeaky clean. But I wouldn't want somebody coaching Ohio State with that kind of baggage. Ohio State, I know that at one point they could have hired John Calipari before they settled on before they hired Jake Diebler, before they decided to keep Jake Diebler there. They could have hired John Calipari. I'm glad they didn't. Too much bad stuff happens when Calipari usually leaves the program. Happened at UMass. Happened at Memphis. Kentucky, I don't think there was much of that, but, and then who knows about Arkansas got him there. But I did not want that reputation. I had a conversation with Bobby Carpenter about this on our show on 97.1 The Fan, the Morning Juice. And he wishes that Ohio State would have hired Bobby Knight when they had the chance, way back when, before they hired Jim O'Brien. And I could not disagree with him more. I wanted no part of Bobby Knight at Ohio State. The guy could win, for a while at least, certainly. But that reputation, the choking of Neil Reed, those things, I would want no part of that at Ohio State. Yes, I want Ohio State to win, but not at all costs. Not at all costs. By the way, NC State is hiring Tennessee assistant Justin Gainey to be their next head coach. He was a former guard for NC State. One of the March Madness thing I want to throw to you is just something the way I look things up. I thought this was an interesting story. But back in the 1979-80 season, so we're talking about the 1980 NCAA tournament. I think there may have been 48 teams at that point, maybe 42. I'm at 48 though. Anyway, Texas A&M had to play North Carolina. A&M the 6 seed, North Carolina the 3 seed. It was I believe the second round was this one was. But anyway, North Carolina back then was famous because it's pre-shot clock, pre-3-point shot. North Carolina was famous for taking the air out of the ball, running a 4 corners offense. So they are tied in this game, 53-53 at the end of regulation. They go to overtime, play a full overtime period. The score at the end of overtime, 53-53. No points scored in the entire overtime. They have to go to the second overtime. In the second overtime, Texas A&M outscores them 25-8, goes on to win 78-61 in double overtime. A 17-point win in double overtime. I don't think I've ever seen that before. I've also never seen a team go 0 in the first overtime and then scoring that much in the second overtime. So, look, that's just a silly little fact. Nothing, no context to it. I just thought it was interesting, though, when I read that. Let's switch over to the women's college basketball tournament. UConn pounded Notre Dame 70-52 to get to the Final Four. Hannah Hidalgo's junior year for Notre Dame ended with a 22-point, 11 rebound, 3 assists, 3 steal performance. She was so damn good this year. And I know that you technically, yes, she could go if she wanted to. She could declare for the WNBA draft, but I hope she sticks around and plays another year for Notre Dame. UConn just looks so damn good. They're well on their way to another undefeated national championship season. UCLA trailed early, but then rallied to beat Duke 70-58 in the other game. A couple of number 1 seeds advancing. Tonight, Michigan plays Texas. South Carolina takes on TCU in the other one. UConn, UCLA, like I said, number 1 seeds. So are Texas and South Carolina. So we could have 4 number 1 seeds in the Final Four on the women's side, but UConn really is the way to go. I think they're going to win this whole thing. But UConn, UCLA, both damn good. The Athletics' Matt Baker had an interesting piece last week. And by the way, subscribe to The Athletic if you haven't already. It's the best place to get your sports news. It's cheap. A lot of great journalists have had a lot of experience. We've got a lot of good reporters out there doing great work for The Athletic. Okay, he did a piece on how much do college players really get paid and how secretive the schools are about that. The Athletic put in over 70 requests to different schools asking for the payrolls of the players. No one did it except James Madison, and theirs, what they sent out, though, was a list of their football payroll, all the salaries each player got, but all the names were redacted. They couldn't tell who it was. But all that was out there, though. They did that. And the point that Matt Baker made in the article was you can go online right now, and you can see that, and this I'm going straight from the article here, a janitor at UMass makes $44,000. a surgery professor at Florida, makes $1.35 million. They also found out through the record request that the North Carolina's football recruiting budget is $2.6 million. Houston's men's basketball team's food expenses, $504,000. All that's out there. You can go find that. You can request it, and they'll do that. But not what the players are making. Louisiana attorney Scott Sternberg. Now, look, we talked about LSU already with all these things with the coaches, all the money they're paying out. And this is not talking about the players at all when that other stuff goes, but Louisiana attorney Scott Sternberg said, we need to know what we're getting for our investment. The other things that schools would get, 7 of the schools provided sport-by-sport breakdowns. Like, for instance, football players got $1.5 million from San Diego State. Football players got $13.5 million from NC State. UConn said that they paid $11.6 million among 536 athletes in their programs from July 1st to December 31st. Everything else, though, is hidden. We don't know what it is. Do you want to know? Do you think you have a right to know what your team, what your if it's a public school, public university, what they're paying players? Because I go back and forth on this. On one hand, I don't think it should be hidden. I also am a season ticket holder for Ohio State football. And I know the prices go up. There's a per-seat donation I have to make for Ohio State football tickets. I know that's going to keep increasing. They call it a donation. It's a PSL is what it is, and it just gives you the right to buy the tickets. So, and that donation usually costs more than the actual tickets. So I'm paying more than double what I normally would have because I'm being forced to make this donation to the university's athletic funds. South Carolina's athletic director, Jeremiah Donati, said that if, this is South Carolina, he said if Alabama knew what our football payroll was, and he threw out the hypothetical $17 million, the Crimson Tide would spend $17 million and one. I don't buy that. I don't think Alabama's all that worried about South Carolina's payroll as it comes to football. I could be wrong on that, but I'm just saying I think Alabama's probably more concerned about Georgia, maybe Auburn, schools like that, less so with South Carolina. But we'll see what happens with that. If public universities will be forced to disclose that information, and I understand what the Louisiana attorney is saying, because if that money's coming to pay guys, to pay coaches, to pay buyouts, to pay whatever, from any kind of public money, I'd like to know that. Switching over to the NFL. Preseason games in the NFL. Here in Columbus, Ohio, we've got, we'll get a Bengals game usually on, local TV. It'll be like over the air. It'll be a Cincinnati broadcast, something like that. We'll get a Bengals game here, a Browns game in the preseason, a Steelers game at least one, maybe two from some of those teams as well, in addition to the normal like national Fox broadcasts and whatnot. Well, preseason games now might go away from the way of local markets. The NFL is considering allowing teams to sell preseason games and their own original shows to streaming platforms. So if you are the Dallas Cowboys, you could approach Netflix, say, hey, look, we want to put our preseason games on Netflix. And as long as it's not a national game, Netflix gets it, Cowboys get the money, more money for the teams to spend on their various teams. So there's a lot of things to look at. The league meetings in Arizona this week, they're going to talk about it there, but Sports Business Journal put this out there that there is talk about doing that with NFL preseason games. Other news, sad news last week, former Raiders center Barrett Robbins died at the age of 52. Robbins played for the Raiders from 95 to 2003. He was a second-round pick back in the 95 draft. And he was infamously known for going missing the day before the Super Bowl when Super Bowl 37, Tampa Bay and the Raiders. He went missing the day before, gone for nearly 24 hours. At the time, his coach, Bill Callahan, coach of the Raiders, said that Robbins was incoherent when he came back and was unable to play. Robbins disclosed in the future that he had not taken his medication for depression and bipolar disorder. So Robbins dealt with a lot of stuff, man. Mental health, no joke. Robbins played 9 games in 2003 and then released in 2004 because he had got caught for performance-enhancing drugs. But anyway, Robbins had all kinds of issues after that, law enforcement issues. In 2005, he was shot 3 times by police police who were investigating a reported burglary down at Miami Beach. Pleaded guilty to 5 charges. 2011, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for a drug-related probation violation, released in 2012. So Robbins certainly had his demons, but nonetheless, it was a tragic story. Passed away at the age of 52 last week. We go from other NFL news now. Not really NFL news, I guess, but kind of is. We know the NFL players who had thrown together a couple of teams to play flag football against Team USA, or against the best flag football players in the United States. And the flag football veterans, they ran roughshod over the NFL teams. Now, the NFL teams didn't have like their best of the best, but you had Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels out there. Tom Brady was flinging it around a little bit. You had Alvin Kamara out there. You had Odell Beckham Jr. There were a number of players out there. And then on top of that, they also had like some of the, to get viewers. They had Jake Paul was out there, Terrence Crawford, one was a boxer and one's just a fake boxer. They also had Gronk played too, by the way, but there were influencers out there. I don't know what the iSpeed guy name was. Anyway, they had other guys out there though that didn't really make an impact though. A couple of former NFL players. I mentioned Brady, I mentioned Gronk, also Luke Kuechly played. Nonetheless, so Team USA is putting a team together to compete in the World Championships. This is pre-Olympics. Olympics aren't until 28. The World Championships this summer in Germany. And they held tryouts, essentially is what they did. 2 notable names that tried out. RG3 tried out, and he actually he's moving on to the next stage. The next stage, they took 24 players, are going to go through like a 3-day training evaluation process, and then they will whittle it down from there. But RG3, though, made it to the next level. One guy who didn't, by the way, RG3, 2011 won the Heisman Trophy. Remember that? The one who didn't, though, is Darrell Green. Yes, that Darrell Green. 66-year-old Darrell Green. He still competes as a senior sprinter. He was 66 years old out there. He did Pro Football Hall of Fame cornerback. He did not make the cut. So, but RG3 does move on. Other news in the NBA. The NBA is they're talking about 3 different ways to avoid tanking. They're all very different. I'll just kind of give you the Cliff's Notes because it makes my head hurt when I talk about it. They're saying the bottom 10 teams all get 8% chance, equal percent of 8% chance of moving up in the lottery. And then the other, so that'll be 80% right there, the bottom 10 teams. The remaining 20% will be split among the 8 play-in teams in descending order from 11th through 18th. All 18 spots, so will be drawn as a lottery as part of that format. The other one, so that right there is basically saying if you're in one of the worst 10 teams, if you're the worst team or the 10th worst team, you've got the same odds no matter what. All right, the second one has 22 teams. The bottom 10 that make the bottom 10 that miss the play-in tournament, the 8 that qualify for it, and the 4 playoff teams that lose in the first round. So that's 22 teams. The bottom 10, 8 that qualify for the play-in tournament, and then the 4 playoff teams that lose in the first round will all be included in the lottery, ranked according to their record over 2 seasons. But what's silly about it is, and this is kind of what the WNBA does too, but you have to get a certain win total, a floor, if you will, in each season. So if the minimum floor for a season was 20 wins, and a team went 14-68, they would actually be 20-62. And if a team won 40 games and then 20 the next, it'd go in as 30 wins for the lottery. So that's one of the other proposals as well. The third one's a 5x5 method. The same 18 teams from the first concept, the bottom 10 that miss the play-in, plus the 8 that make it, enter into a lottery. The teams with the 5 worst records would all have the same odds. Look, the way you do this, the easiest way to do this is to just the team with the best record that misses the playoffs, they get the number 1 pick and go backwards that way. Convince teams to try. If you've got the best record and miss the playoffs, you've got the best odds in the draft. So, all right, folks, that's it for me, Jeff Thitoff. Follow me on Twitter, @ThitHappens. This has been the Jeff Thitoff Show. I'm Tito, right here on FanStream Sports.